Welcome with today live. Very excited guest. I'm very excited about our today's guest, Gil Hedley, Fascia, Health and Spirituality. Okay, I will invite our guest. Very excited. Welcome, Gil.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us for today's live. It's about fascia, health, and spirituality. I'm very excited about having you today with us at Integral Body Institute. I am big fan of you, watching your channel, and it's amazing content. I'm myself body worker, and I really appreciate your passion for fascia, for dissectomy. I will just introduce you. I know since 1995 you are a Ph.D. doctor. You have explored the inner space of human form with thousands of participants in the dissection lab, lecture hall, and online. You are also producer of Integral Anatomy series and author of several books, and you're committed for developing the field of integral anatomy as a playground to somanauts for years to come. So welcome.
That's me.
Yeah. So let's start maybe this amazing journey about fascia, about dissectomy, anatomy, with the first question. And that is what has fascia taught you about our connection as a human beings?
Well, I can think of several ways to speak to that. One is when I bring together a group of people in the laboratory and we're exploring fascia at that level, it's an incredible community building event. And people make friends and stay friends for many years after coming to the class. And I think that's because it's sort of an as above, so below, or as below, so above phenomenon. When you witness the depth of connection within, with appreciation and acceptance and respect, and even love and amazement and awe, that impact of witnessing the connection within the body deeply affects the way you relate to other people. You just can't treat people as badly as we're accustomed to doing so when you see that each and every one of us are sharing the richness of this internal milieu, this world of the body. And it makes you question even the limits of the body and what you think a body is. If you think a body is me, then you move along in your little isolated body pod. But if you consider that maybe the body is bigger than your skin, radiating beyond the limits here, such that we're exchanging electrons with the people we're standing next to. We're bonding with them in a field. And that the human body maybe isn't my human body or your human body, but our human body extended around the planet in a giant organism, then the connection that we see inside the body, just like we can say the connective tissue continues or wraps around the cells, and then we have our cytoskeleton, which is linked to that outer matrix, and then on into your unfolding DNA along the structures of the cytoskeleton. And then why would we imagine that stops at our skin? and that maybe there are even more subtle connections that are filling the space in between us that we imagine empty.
Beautiful. Wow, that's deep. I like this connection between human beings being connected in this matrix of humanity and connective tissue within our body that is the major organ that holds everything together. So I would like to ask you maybe what's your view on the health and how fascia play role in our physical, emotional health, spiritual health?
Well, fascia, because it's surrounding and investing and relating everything and making a communication pathway through our body. Not only our nerves, but our connective tissues are a communication pathway. There are no nerves that are not invested in multiple layers of connective tissue, even, right? And so when we adopt patterns, compensations, social norms that actually create limit cycles on our movement and our way of relating to each other, those limit cycles that we place upon the fluidity of our fascia then limit the rate and speed and quality of communication inside the body. They can limit the flow of information, even the flow of electrons, right? On their way to a site of inflammation, which is a pool of protons. Well, are we slippery enough inside? Are we free enough in our movements to allow the flow, say, of electrons from the earth to meet places of inflammation? Or are our patterns, when we sit all day long, or maybe we have very limited behaviors, opening the refrigerator door, closing the refrigerator door, turning the doorknob, turning the car key, wiggling our fingers. These patterns result in fluidity in some places in our fascial network and stillness, stasis, dehydration, and inflammation in other areas, right? The ones that aren't being used. So when we leave much of our body offline, as it were, then the tissues change. They can become more gummy and less slippery, more sticky and less slippery. And that stickiness we experience as a limitation of our movement expression, or vice versa. The limitation of our movement expression creates that. And then we've reduced our functioning as a whole being, and we've reduced the potential movement of our organs, which like to move around with every breath. We hold our breath. And this is all the fascia is adaptive to these patterns. And it doesn't have to stay that way, but it definitely affects our health. That's why touch is so nice. Because when we're touched, especially mindful touch or smart touch, like professionals of body work, massage, structural work, myofascial work, all these types of interaction with our physical form bring movement manually into tissues that we don't know how to move ourselves. And that's why we feel so good, because our whole body is born to move. And when we adopt our social structures so convincingly that we become a monk or a person who fits in, then we also suffer the loss of movement. We got to be a little quirky, a little weird. Get a little weird, folks.
I'm very happy you mentioned those elements, because you mentioned in relation to in relating to our health keywords like movement, fascia, touch, and those are elements that at our training in Integral Body Institute we are really bringing very close attention in terms of working with the fascia, with pain syndrome, with trauma. We also bring elements like emotional fluidity, meditation. Yeah, you are confirming also the way we work at Integral Body Institute. So it's really amazing. And I think
there's instinct for that. I think we crave it, and so we give what we crave. And it's wonderful that you have this institute to bring movement and life and to people. Good for you.
I'm very curious your insight about developing fascia over years, because you are in the field for 25 years now, and the fascia is relatively new concept, or a relatively new view on human body. You know, for many years by many anatomists, it was just treated as a packing material and disregarded. And only lately, since maybe 40, since Rolfing and Idarov brought like the first kind of deep body work into the world, and focusing on fascia, now it's kind of like wherever you go, it's a hot topic. And I'm wondering, over your 25 years of experience, how fascia, how your understanding on fascia for our health and for human body developed, and what do you think will progress with this topic? Where are we going?
Well, I started off in graduate school at the University of Chicago, which, by the way, Chicago is the second most Polish city in the world, next to Warsaw. And that's where I learned about Rolfing. My mother got Rolfed, and she went from feeling, I would give her Tai Chi massage, and it was like wood. It was like massaging wood and cinder block. And then she got Rolfed, and it was like, woo, so much fluidity. I couldn't believe it. So I got curious about Rolfing. And in 1991, I went to the Rolf Institute. Tom Myers had a pre-training. If you wanted to become a Rolfer and you had no massage training, they did a pre-training at the Rolf Institute. And that's how I was initially exposed to the concept of fascia. So I became a Rolfer, and having my hands on people, I'm needing in my own mind to see what I'm touching. And so I went to the dissection lab and started doing dissection so I could see what I was touching. And my dissection was very much influenced by the Rolf Institute and the sharing that took place there about fascia and its importance. And it made me very curious. I want to see this stuff. And so I went to the lab and it never left. But, you know, my idea of fascia going in was very limited. You think IT band, plantar fascia. And I have to say that much of the research in the fascia community, because you're asking where is it going, much of the research has been focused on the kind of fascia that's easier to research. It's easier to research the plantar fascia and thoracolumbar fascia and IT band because they're easy to get to. You can get it out of a rat. You can put a hook in it, measure it. It's very sturdy. But what captured my interest over the years has always been the thing that's a little less easy and a little less obvious, because it's like the underdog. We like to root for the underdog, right? So fascia is the underdog of anatomy. So we have all the people who love the underdog rooting for fascia. But then what is the fascia underdog? Something like superficial fascia or membranes, things like what I call perifascia. These are very diaphanous, thin, slippery membranes that with some practice you can cut into sheets and show them to be fascia. But we don't know as much about them as we have learned about the more dense regular fascia. So the dense regular fascia, I would say, get 99% of the papers written on them. And then these less easy to dissect, slightly less easy to work with tissues like superficial fascia, considered as adipose layer, or perifascia, the membranous layers. So I'm very interested to learn and see research happen in the future that will help us to understand those layers better, because they have so much to do with movement. The dense regular fascia are more stabilizing. I call them exoskeleton, while the perifascia, the slippery membranes, and the adipose layers, or what I call superficial fascia, are very, movie. And that makes me ask questions like, well, then what is their involvement with proprioception? Is there a great deal of hyaluronidase in the perifascia, maybe? Are there fasciocytes, like Carlos Deca describes, abundant in the perifascia that would make them so slippery? Is there more elastin than collagen? I don't know the answers to these questions, and I don't even know how to do that kind of research, because my research is very practical, knife, body, curiosity. Those are my three ingredients, and persistence. But people who know how to do laboratory studies, I'm hoping, will someday tell us and explain to us maybe these other textures of fascia and how they function. What's their physiology? I want to learn better the physiology of perifascia, particularly, as well as adipose, which is beautiful, fascinating metabolic organ, very complicated, very important to our health, and very characteristically human. The fatty layer is a very human layer. We wrestle with it. We fight against it. We are mean to it sometimes, and yet all throughout history, humans have had this important layer, and it's essential to our health and functioning and flourishing.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just make a very short break, acknowledging all our viewers right now online watching us. Thank you for joining us the live with Gil Hedley. We're talking about fascia, health, spirituality. If you have any questions about the topic, please put the questions over the chat, and we will ask Gil for the answer. And I really
Google
like
Gil.
Say it again.
I said Google Gil.
Google Gil, yes. We will send Gil's YouTube links and website. But you mentioned about perifascia, and one of your videos recorded 8 years ago now, I've seen had over 1 million views, and it's a fast talk. And that's really fascinating when you're showing the perifascia, this membranous fascia in between layers that very often can cause adhesion between layers and can limit our movement in the joints, in the muscles. So I would like to ask you, what is your view, because you mentioned about movement and bringing fascia, perifascia to elasticity, But I wonder, what's your view on, let's say, movement versus touch or combination of both, in relationship to bring that perifascia to its elasticity, to liquidity, to bring the matrix back into health, into radiate, to be radiant and fluid?
Well, the beauty of perifascia, I used to call it fuzz because I didn't know better. I had to start somewhere. I was like, what's this fuzzy stuff? But I eventually realized that it was fascia and that it belonged there. And the question wasn't whether it belonged there or could we make it go away. That's the wrong question. The question is, what's its condition? What's its quality? How is the texture in our body? Is it okay? And how does our movement reflect lack of health in our perifascia? When it's in health, it's slippery. But think of it. Have you ever used glue when you're a child and glue paper together? Well, what is glue made out of? They say, we're going to send our old horse to the glue factory. Why would they do that? Well, because the collagen in the horse makes the glue, right? Or marshmallows. Do you know marshmallows? This thing, you put it on a stick and put it in a fire. Marshmallows, delicious. It's collagen, right? And you go like this with a marshmallow and it's so sticky, right? So our connective tissue has inherent in its chemistry, in its physiology, the propensity to get sticky and to hold things together. But we don't want to allow our tissues to devolve into a sticky state. They can be, though, sticky. And then the good news is we can return our tissues from a sticky state to a more slippery state through movement and use of our tissues. But also, if we go too far with our lack of movement, the sticky can become crystalline. We can form crystals in our connective tissue, and then the tissues become brittle. So someone is asking, can torn fascia layers heal? Yes. Yes, absolutely. We are healers. We are born healers. But remember, the healing of fascia often means to form a scar. Now, a scar is not a bad thing. The scar keeps us on the planet longer. If we couldn't form scars, right, and heal our torn fascia layers, we would not have been so successful of a species, right? We're a very successful species because we heal so beautifully. Now, it's like we have a doctor that lives within us and is always with us, and that is that stickiness, the capacity to heal what is broken. But in order to, if the doctor is thinking, I need to keep busy, while this person sits still, I will knit this to that and make it stick. So because we have this beautiful property, this healing capacity, this ability to be stuck together again, we also have a problem. We're like sharks. We have to keep moving. A shark always has to keep moving. Mm-hmm. And humans also, we have to keep moving because that internal doctor is determined to take care of us by sticking together everything that we don't use. So if we don't use it, the doctor will be like, they don't need it, I'm going to stick it together. The internal doctor, this property of connective tissue to connect things, will engage in places where we don't want things connected forever, right? So it's pros and cons. In order to have this internal healer present so that when we're injured, we can knit ourselves back together again. We can't ever fire the doctor. So we have to keep moving. We have to keep moving and keep restoring the fluidity that is always wanting to knit together.
Mm. What kind of movement you would recommend? Because I'm just curious, what's your view on, we are such a complex beings, emotions, feelings, physical body, emotional body, spiritual body. And what in your opinion caused the contraction, and with the movement, how we can, because some movement can be also, harmful for our body if it's too pushy, if it's too competitive. We know
Yes.
this, people in the sport that get so much injury, where the movement is not implemented in the right way. So what creates contraction in the soft tissue, and what kind of movement can bring it to the fluid flow?
The word that pops into my mind is spontaneous movement. So we have a tendency, because of our minds, to go into movement ruts, to repeat and repeat. Oh, I like that one. I'll do it again and again and again. And then it's no longer serving us, right? Because it's creating a neurological rut, a pattern, that pattern is a limit cycle on some tissues and freedom for other tissues. Now, like you mentioned, sports, sometimes we sacrifice our body for our sport, right? So Tiger Woods, golfer, right? He has a very valuable movement rut that he's created in his body, because he's created a movement rut that puts the ball 300 yards down the fairway and then puts the ball in the cup. So it's worth millions and millions of dollars. And maybe his shoulders don't work the same way from one side to the other. And maybe he has torsion in his back because he moves like a golf swing. And yet he's willing to say, okay, I'll put up with some physical distress in order to be successful in my sport. But if we're wanting to have abundant experience of our body, and this is true for basketball players, I don't mean to pick on Tiger Woods, he's amazing, but just to say that sometimes the rut we choose, like a ballerina chooses a very specific pattern of movement to express their art form. And the body suffers for that. So how do you get out of it? How do you recover from it? You have to do something completely different. So a dear friend of mine, a Pilates master, I say she has a triple black belt in Pilates, right? It's a very specific kind of movement, very controlled. It's amazing to watch. And yet to undo that patterning, she dances every night. Very free, spontaneous dancing. So I would say that whatever movement patterns you choose, do something else too, because you have to, be able to move spontaneously in response to your environment, your life, the provocations of Earth upon our bodies, right? Just life, like my life, I live on a mountainside now. It's very demanding. You got to go up a hill with a little bit of oxygen, and then there's wood to move, and there's, dead trees that have to be chopped up. And these sorts of things demand functional whole body movement. That's my favorite, as opposed to picking a machine. So when I was in high school, we had a machine called the universal machine. It had maybe 5 stations: military press, bench press, leg press. What else was it? Oh, lat pull down. That was it. 1975, and so all the kids walked around like, they walked around like the movement range of motion of that machine. Well, that's not enough. It limits your spontaneity. Dance is good.
Dance, yeah. We put a lot of emphasis in our trainings. Either it's myofascial energetic release taught by Satyarthi, or by dynamic breathwork and trauma release, on unwinding, myofascial unwinding, that spontaneous movement that is coming from the core, from the wisdom of the body, where it usually comes from that connected movement of proprioception, felt sense, where we can feel actually what is the expression of the movement emotionally also. And I
Nice.
think that really I see results of that kind of movement on myself and many of our students, and it's tremendously beneficial for the body. And it's fun because it's not like rigid, like, I don't know, some practices can be very rigid, you do one asana after the other, but somehow with unwinding or dance, you mentioned, it's spontaneous, it's playful, it brings that
Yes.
quality of being in the moment, listening to the body. And I think this is kind of switching off our mind, because we're living in such a cognitive times where so much is happening in our mind. And I think through the dance, we can for a moment forget about all these thoughts overwhelming us and just be in the body. It's such a beautiful way to embrace embodiment.
So true, so true. And you mentioned the emotional component. I think it's huge because our emotional life is body expression, right? So emotion from Latin ex, like out from, and movement. So the movement out from, the feelings within moving out into this space, right? So sometimes they're over contained, right? Or controlled, and that movement is not permitted. That spontaneous emotional expression is very much limited by our cultural context, familial context, our work circumstances, the things in our environment that say, you can't express that right now, I'm sorry. Now, that may be so. We need to live in a relationship with other people. And so, but make a time where the movement can happen, right? Because the normal life doesn't always permit what the body needs.
Yeah. I'm just looking in any questions on the chat box from our students. So feel free to ask any questions.
I see Ita has a question about a hernia. Do I have hope my hernia will self-heal? Well, you are the self, right? So it's not like you can sit around waiting for your hernia to heal, because it's going to take your conscious involvement. If you're choosing, say, not to do surgery or get a mesh or something like that, then there are going to have to be other strategies that you'll discover through your own practice of movement in relationship to that hernia, right? Like, it may be harder to pick up something heavy, but then again, you might learn how to do it in a way that creates a different strain pathway through your body, different vectors of force that don't hurt you. Also, I do know that more superficial fascia is actually protective with regard to a hernia. I don't know the cause of your particular hernia, but you also need to then maybe look at your movement patterns and see how such a thing could evolve in that direction and maybe work in the other direction. But the tissues, I mean, I've seen meshes put in, I've dissected many hernias, and Kevlar, which is what they put in, basically like a very dense mesh, can create all kinds of scarring and difficulties. And I know in the United States, class action lawsuits with respect to these mesh hernia repairs because of the nerve implication on the nerves that can take place. I don't know your particular circumstances, and I'm not a doctor. I'm just talking as someone who's played with hernias in the cadavers.
I'm curious also about your view on pain syndrome, because pain becomes epidemic in our society. There's billions of people suffering from different kind of pains. I think the major one we know it's lower back, neck, knee pains, and what is your view on pain and fascia, soft tissue, taking part on that, because it's a huge topic, and I think it's very often disregarded, especially by medical world in some ways. I'm just curious, what's your view?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a child of the 70s. And back then it was pain means gain. So I don't believe that at all anymore. I understand the sentiment because I grew up in it. But I think that we are oftentimes considering the body to be something other. And our personal relationship with our body being sometimes distant and separate maybe can cause all manner of pain. I have suffered a great deal of pain in my life, so I have some personal expertise in pain. And the pain that's more general physical pain, I've gotten in a much better relationship with, because I'm more respectful of my body. I don't just work it until it breaks, like I did when I was a young weightlifter in the 70s. And I went through all kinds of personal work to let go, because a lot of pain is holding, and a lot of holding is emotional. And so sometimes it takes some personal work to get through some types of pain. And then other types of pain, they're not too easy to overcome. So I think the good news about pain that's in the fascia is that we have now many approaches that can help to resolve that. I think of my friends, Sue Hitzman, or Jill Miller, Anthony Crisco. These are people who've taken up self-care techniques, where you can kind of auto Rolf yourself. In other words, using rollers and balls and all these types of things. So I think there's good news for people suffering pain that is rooted in fascia, because there's so many nice, both hands-on treatments, but they can be expensive after a while. You might not be able to afford your own best practitioner, but these methods that you can bring home are very nice. Melt method, a roll model. These are nice practices, and they are influenced by knowledge of fascia and learning how not to irritate it more, because many people will use these tools and irritate themselves more because they think pain is good. That must means I'm getting to it. It's not true. Our bodies are like horses, and you need to whisper them and gentle them, and when there's injury, you need to pet and care for and love and sneak up on them and soften them and help them to let go of this response, this traumatic record in the tissues that really can be healed. So I have very positive hope, for people in pain, which pain is particularly rooted in fascia, which has a lot of nerves in it. And so, and the thing is, once those things are irritated and you're in a protective, traumatized state, then you develop all kinds of compensations, which muscular compensations, movement pattern, gait compensations, postural compensations that then can make it worse. So, but the good news is I think there's a lot of ways to get out of it.
Mm. You mentioned something now about traumatic record in the fascia, either probably from developmental trauma from childhood, when we grow up, when we create our personality. There's a lot of events in our life that can really take part into creating our personality, our body, our fascial network. But also it could be any shock, trauma, or accident. So could you talk a little bit more about these traumatic records in the fascia and how we could unwind those?
Yeah. So we live on a dangerous and sometimes painful planet that, and life throws its slings and arrows at us. And so we do experience things. And then maybe our relationship with those experiences results in a kind of healing, in the sense that we're not in the immediate acute phase of an injury, but we can then maybe withdraw ourselves, I think, and this happens very often, withdraw ourselves from places of trauma or injury in our bodies, and we sequester our energy outside of that place rather than pouring it in. And I think it's maybe counterintuitive to the experience of pain to go into it rather than to just avoid it. Because, if you put your finger towards the flame of a candle, it hurts. We reflexively pull back. But after that immediate first phase, okay, I'm clear now of danger and I'm in a safe place, then as soon as possible, following upon injury, we need to go in and feel and restore good feelings to that place rather than pulling our energy, pulling our feelings and sensations away from there and staying away from there. Because then you're walking around after 50 or 60 years and there's this thing and this thing and this thing, and there's 10 different places in your body where you won't even go. And your gait is literally moving around these places, and your breath is moving around these places rather than through them. And so I think there's a bit of psychology to it to overcome our natural withdrawal from a place of pain. But if we're on a path of wholeness, if we're on a quest to embody our whole self, then we have to face those sites of injury and re-enter them with our consciousness. And that's why therapists can be so helpful, right? Because they can kind of hold our hand, walk us up to the place with their hands, walk to it, say, oh, look, this actually can feel good here. There can be good sensations here again. And then you go into that.
Mm-hmm. One more question that comes to me is about aging. What's the process of aging fascia, and how we can restore this process? You mentioned already things like movement, breath. There was a touch, but I wonder, for example, about nutrients. Do you think any specific supplements can be helpful to maintain soft tissue in good health, the body, and keep us, in longevity? Like, it's a big topic.
Yeah, certainly. I would have to say yes. We can do better for ourselves with regard to our food and such. But I also feel that what that looks like for any given individual can be very different, although you'd probably do well to put away a lot of processed foods. That and foods that inflame us, right? There's so many inflammatories in our complex processed foods that we could probably skip. However, so saying that and knowing that what is particular food choices that are good for a given individual is very varied. And I think there has to be some experiment for every person to find out what works for them. There's a different level, I think, to the aging issue, and that is the mental one. Because if I keep telling myself, oh, I'm 58, look at my beard, it's gone gray. Where did young Gil go? Or, oh, these aches and pains that you get when you're approaching 60. Do I lean into that disposition mentally, or you can literally reject it? I I transformed my body last year one more time because I was getting out of the car like an old man. And I heard about this study from my partner, Rachel. She told me about it. She said they took a bunch of people, men, older men, and said, pretend you're 20 years younger. Just pretend. Just think of yourself that way. Every measurable metric of those people's health improved. Their muscle strength improved. Their everything improved. They got taller. And I did it too. And it works. It's incredible. So I decided 20 years wasn't enough. So right now I'm about 35. I'm very physically active. I engage my world. And when I feel that myth of agedness come upon me, I literally just shake it off. I'm like, I'm 35. And I get out and I do things. It's been great being 35 again.
Yeah.
It changes the way I walk through space. It changes the way I think about myself. I'm just like, no, I'm 35. And when I tell myself that, it's a form of brainwashing that I think is very positive. It's really very much in the mind.
I have one question. It's from Kasha. The question is, how about cold dips and fascia? Do they regularly? I do them regularly, and the first thing I notice is I can stretch easier. Everything is a bit softer. It's a big movement about Wim Hof and breathing and the cold showers and all this stuff. I do them occasionally too, and I must say I feel better if I do them, or if I swim in a cold water. How is your?
I don't know how that works, but I'm afraid to do it. I lived in Florida for the last 12 years. It was very warm. And now I'm 2 years in Colorado, and I'm getting quite used to the cold again. So maybe someday I'll dip in the cold, but I'm going to take your word for it that you stretch easier and feel softer, and that's very inspiring to me. And maybe I need to follow up myself, because I'll do anything I can that will make things a better experience for my life and body. So I personally can't speak to it, but I'm fascinated by you speaking to it. So.
I will take your advice about mental reset to, go back to my 20s maybe then and see how it is.
20s. I'll meet you in your 20s.
25 maybe, okay.
Yeah, I don't want my mind from when I was in my 20s, but my body I'll take.
Yeah. Thank you, Gil. It was wonderful to meet you. I'm really happy for our meeting, and thank you everybody for listening us. I will recommend you follow Gil's YouTube channel. It's called Somanauts, and it has a lot of amazing videos. He does the fast talk, heart dance, lung breathing, pituitary gland. I very much like Respect Your Neck, the short video where you show all the nerve coming into the brachial plexus, and many other movies from your dissection lab. So please follow Gil's YouTube, and also website is gilhedley.com. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm very happy for this evening together. Have a wonderful evening or morning if it's Canada or America.
Thank you, Nisarga. And also, folks, in addition to the free stuff on the YouTube channel, there's on my website over 20 hours of free content. That's more than even on YouTube. If you take the Easy Rider free membership, and you can enjoy that forever.
Okay, so just summarize maybe with one final one or two phrases your wisdom about health to our audience.
We're born to move, and we're born to enjoy. So move and enjoy.
Move and enjoy. Beautiful. Let's finish this way. Let's move and enjoy. Thank you, Gil, very much. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful
Thank you.
day. Namaste.
Pleasure.